All right, folks, this brings us to Unit 10. Let me rewrite all of this. Nope. Unit 10, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. Unit 10, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. And folks, this is the final unit of this class. This is the last unit of U.S. history. So, keep that in mind. We are down to the wire, folks. After this, about 4 or 5 weeks of lecture. That's it. And then 4 or 5 weeks of review. And then your AP test. So that's how close we are to that.
Super easy AP test.
You should tell them that.
I know it is. You got a 4. Come on.
Eric says that the AP test is very easy. You just have to do your work. I agree. The AP test is pretty easy as long as you pass it. The Unit 10, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement, our topic for today, and we'll continue this topic into Friday, is Truman's presidency and the Cold War. Truman's presidency and the Cold War. So first off, let's talk about Truman's foreign policy. And let's begin the final unit. All right. Truman's foreign policy. The first thing we're going to talk about are the roots of the Cold War. The roots of the Cold War. So we really have to figure out what this war is about. And ultimately, this is a war between which two countries? The U.S. and Russia. And really, they're going to be pulling at this carrot back and forth. It's really a war between both the U.S. and Russia. And the rest of these other countries below, they're going to try to get as many scraps as they can. But this is really a war between these two major countries here. Now, the way we want to frame this first off is why do they want to go to war? So let's talk about the U.S. point of view first. So why is there a Cold War in the first place? Well, from the U.S. perspective, what is their opinion of the Soviet Union? Why are they concerned about the Soviet Union? The biggest concern that the Americans have is they believe that the Soviets want to spread communism across the world. So the biggest concern the Americans have is, one, the Soviets want to spread communism across the world. And this is a problem, because as we previously stated, does communism work with the American government? It doesn't. They don't coincide. They are two different. And the concern is that if the Soviets spread communism, is that going to be harder for America to have friends across the world? Yeah, Americans are not friends with communist countries. And so if the rest of the world becomes communist, that means America will have fewer and fewer friends. Secondly, they don't trust the Germans, or they don't trust the Russians. There's a lot of mistrust of the Russians because the Russians lied about promoting free elections in Eastern Europe. The Russians lied about promoting free elections in Eastern Europe. Again, the Russians lied about promoting free elections in Eastern Europe. There was supposed to be democracy in Eastern Europe, and instead, what do they have in Eastern Europe? Communism and dictatorship. We don't like that. They lied about free elections. And what ends up happening is that Eastern Europe becomes part of the Soviet Bloc, also known as the Eastern Bloc. But what ends up happening is that the Eastern European countries become part of the Soviet Bloc or Eastern Bloc because they all become what kind of country? Communist country. Now, you might wonder, well, how did Stalin make these all become communist countries? Well, there are two ways. Number one, he killed all the non-communist leaders before the free elections. And therefore, who could you only vote for? Communist leaders. And so if there was a democratic leader and a communist leader, he killed the democratic leader, which meant there was only communists you could vote for. And so I guess there was free elections, but you killed everyone else, so it wasn't really an election. Secondly, he would let the elections happen, but if a non-communist got elected, he would send in his military and get rid of them. And he would take the government by force. And so, okay, fine, you had free elections, but you didn't honor them. So I guess there were free elections, but I guess Stalin didn't promise not to, honor them. So this is how he takes over. And because the Soviets, and pretty much this is the Soviet Union, guys, all of this is technically part of the Soviet Union, but back here is where Russia is. This big red part, that's Russia. Pretty much he controls this entire Eastern Bloc with his military. He controls it with military and puppet governments. That's how he controls this entire region, with a military and puppet governments. In any case, he takes control here, and is America too happy about that? No. And America sees this act in Eastern Europe as Russia trying to Russia trying to create a communist empire. They see this as them trying to create a communist empire. They see them trying to create a communist empire here. They also don't like the fact that Russia refuses to unify Germany. They don't like that too much. They don't like the fact that the Soviet Union doesn't want to unify Germany. They should unify Germany, but they're not. So the Americans don't really trust Russia as a result. And another thing that kind of propels American point of view is the Iron Curtain speech that Winston Churchill gives. This, huh? The U.S. does want to unify Germany. The Soviet Union does not. And so Winston Churchill also gives a famous speech which will also affect American opinion. The speech goes, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lies all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and the populations around them lie in what I must call the Soviet sphere, and all are subject in one form or another, not only to Soviet influence, but to a very high and in some cases increasing measure of control from Moscow." The basic idea is this Iron Curtain represented Soviet control over Eastern Europe. The Iron Curtain represented Soviet control over Eastern Europe. It represented Soviet control over Eastern Europe. Because again, beyond that Iron Curtain, could we spread democracy? Could we promote capitalism beyond that Iron Curtain? No, because there was too much Soviet control. Again, here we are. If we want to send democracy in that direction, or capitalism in that direction, it's not going to happen, because the Iron Curtain represented Soviet control of Eastern Europe. And again, what that Iron Curtain looks like now, there's not an actual Iron Curtain, in case anyone's unsure about that, across Eastern Europe, but it was a ideological one, where because of all the countries behind this wall, are we going to have democracy here? No. And we're going to try to send our ideas over, but the Soviets are going to try to destroy those because they have an Iron Curtain in the way. We're going to try to send democracy. We're going to try to send free elections, but that's not going to happen because there's an Iron Curtain in the way. Does that make sense to everyone? So we feel that this Iron Curtain, again, represents that communist empire. That Iron Curtain represents that communist empire they're trying to create. So we asked the American people, what is your opinion of the Soviets? And right before the war ended, they said, do you think Russia can be trusted to cooperate with us after the war? And the American people said what? Yeah, 54% said sure, so that's still majority, why not? By March 1946, do you think Russia will cooperate with us in world affairs? What's the American answer? No. As you hear and read about Russia these days, do you believe Russia is trying to build herself up to be the ruling power of the world, or is Russia just building up protection against being attacked in another war? The answer is they're trying to be a ruling power. And lastly, do you think the United States is too soft or too tough on Russia? We're too soft. And so what is the opinion of the American people with regard to Russia? Do we trust them? Not at all. We don't trust them. So not only does the government not trust them, but the American people don't trust the Russian government either. They think that something sneaky is going on, that they are trying to build a world power. But the Soviets have their own perspective as well. The Soviets say, no, you have it all wrong. We're not bad. We're not evil. It's you, America, that have lied to us. It's America's fault that the country and the world is in disarray. Lest I remind you, the Soviet perspective is that America is a bunch of liars. The first thing that America lied about was the atomic bomb. The first problem, why they were upset, was that the Soviets were denied access to the atomic bomb. I thought we were friends, America. I thought that we were allies. And so when we're allies, you're supposed to share secrets like the atomic bomb. Or is it my understanding that you want to use that bomb against us? Guys, when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the Soviet Union was pissed. Because they were like, what is that? Why didn't you tell us you had a bomb like this? And the Soviet Union felt betrayed. We thought we were allies, and now you're hiding weapons from us. Now, to be fair, it's not like they were best friends. The reality is the Soviet Union knew that they were going to go to war with America in the future, but they said, you lied to us. Maybe we could have worked together, but now you're lying about bombs. What other weapons are you hiding? The second problem they had with America? America ended Lend-Lease to the Soviet Union during the war. America ended Lend-Lease to Russia during the war. So right after the Russians defeated the Germans at Stalingrad, we ended Lend-Lease and we stopped sending them weapons. Why did we end Lend-Lease to the Russians? Do we want to give the Russians weapons? No, we knew they were going to be our enemy, so we're not going to supply you with weapons if you're going to use it against us in the future. And so America didn't trust Russia with all these weaponries, so they stopped sending it to them. And Russia said, you see, you don't trust us, so we don't trust you. So they accused them of, again, ending Lend-Lease quickly, also lying about the atomic bomb. Another major criticism, the U.S. intentionally delayed the second front. They intentionally delayed the second front. Why did we do that? What did we hope would happen if we delayed the second front? The Russians would lose to who? The Germans. Or the Germans might lose to the Russians, or actually we don't care which. But Truman is even quoted as saying before he was president, if we see that Germany is winning, we ought to help Russia. And if Russia is winning, we ought to help Germany. That way, we let them kill as many as possible. Again, the goal was, we don't like the Russians, we don't like the Germans, let's have them kill each other. And then we'll come in and clean it all up after. And so remember, we were bombed in 1941. We don't open the second front until 1944. So Russia's 3 years we're fighting on our own? What the hell took you so long? And in our mind, it's because we wanted you guys to destroy each other. We really did want you guys to destroy each other. Guys, by the way, during World War II, General Patton, after we invaded Berlin, said, let's just keep marching to Russia. Let's take them out now. We're going to go to war with them eventually. We might as well not stop at Germany. Let's keep marching while we have the momentum and defeat Russia right now. So there was an argument by some in the military that we should actually invade Russia and begin World War III right after World War II. That was really what we wanted to do, or some people wanted to do. So again, they don't trust us either because we delayed the second front. And because of that, the Soviets felt that, look, this bloc you're talking about, we didn't create that in order to create an empire. We created the Soviet bloc as a buffer zone. They created the Soviet bloc for protection. Because what did Germany already do to Russia twice? They invaded them. They invaded them twice. And so they said, look, we're not going to get invaded again. So we didn't create the Soviet bloc to create an empire. We created it for protection. And we're not using them. They're our allies. We're friends. Okay? But these are our allies. And we created this for protection, not to create an empire. Because we don't trust America. And what might America try to do in the future? Invade and attack. And so they say, let's say America tries to invade from France, they're going to have to go through Czechoslovakia and Poland before they get to Russia. And this is why we're doing it. We're getting our friends to help us. In any case, folks, so why a Cold War? Why do we call this a Cold War? Because there was no fighting. There was no direct conflict between the Soviets and the Americans. There was no direct conflict between the Soviets and the Americans. That's why it's called a Cold War. There was no direct conflict between the Soviets and the Americans. And why did we want to avoid direct conflict between the Soviets and the Americans, let's say by 1950? What were we afraid of if the Soviets and the Americans actually went to war against each other? What was the fear? Atomic war. We were afraid of nuclear war. So the reason why it's a Cold War is that if it becomes a hot war, it'll become a nuclear war. And so that's why it's a Cold War. We knew we can't fight them directly, because if we do, actually in the beginning we could have. They don't have the atomic bomb yet. But once they develop an atomic bomb, it has to become a Cold War, because we can't fight them directly. Instead, this becomes a war of words. This becomes a war of capitalism, or capitalism versus communism. This becomes a war of capitalism versus communism. Democracy versus dictatorship. It becomes a war of capitalism versus communism, a war of democracy versus dictatorship. Now, like we said, they didn't fight directly, but they did still kind of fight. Because, and let me answer the phone. Hello? Hi. Here she is. Sure. Hi.
Jackie, go see Miss Molotov.
So the world ultimately gets divided. You have the first world that supports the U.S. So if you're part of the first world, you're a U.S. ally. Which means if you're a second world, you're what? An ally of who? The Russians or the Soviets. So you have the U.S. allies in the Soviet Union in the first world. You have the second world allies in the Soviet Union. Which if you're not part of either, then you're part of the third world. And the third world is part of the non-aligned movement. Now if you look at the third world, which is mostly these green countries right here, most of these countries are what? If you had to generalize all these countries right here, most of these countries are what? They're not wealthy, they're underdeveloped, that's kind of the idea. And so in the third world, America and the Soviet Union are going to fight to get them to join their side. Does that make sense? It's kind of like playing basketball. We've chosen our teams, but we need a few more people, so we're going to try to draft as many of these countries on our team as possible. That's what's going to happen during this wartime. And the other thing is that ultimately the Cold War is a war of proxy battles. It's a war of proxy battles. Because America and the Soviet Union did not fight directly. But they still fought. But they didn't fight directly. And so they fought by proxy. What does that mean, fighting by proxy? Not by words, they did do that. But they had someone else fight for them. And so, brings me to my analogy of Pokemon. The Cold War is Pokemon. Here's why. Here's the Soviet Union. Here's the United States. And they both have guns. Now, if they fight each other directly, are they going to kill each other? Yes, they are. You're like, whoa, whoa. Wait, we're going to kill each other if we keep fighting here. What if we use our Pokemon to fight and we honor the winner of that battle? So the trainers in the Pokemon world, they never fight. You never see Ash Ketchum fighting another trainer physically. It's always their Pokemon fighting. I'm stronger than you because my guy was stronger. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So what Pokemon did we use during the Cold War? Well, you had North Vietnam or South Vietnam for the Americans fighting against North Vietnam, or you had North Korea fighting against South Korea, or you had China for the Soviet Union versus the Democratic Chinese. But again, they fought against each other. And did America ever have to fight directly against the Soviet Union? No. And so it's just like Pokemon. The basic idea is you have people fight by proxy. You fight on my behalf, the same thing that happens in Pokemon all the time. It's proxy battles. You're having people fight by proxy. Any questions there? Nope. Pokemon. It's the Cold War. So let's shape the post-war world. Let's us shape the post-war world. So what is this new world going to look like now that the Russians are, or rather the Germans are gone, now that the Japanese are gone? How are we going to shape this new post-war world? Well, first we're going to have the Bretton Woods Conference. The Bretton Woods Conference. And what ends up happening here, folks, at the Bretton Woods Conference, we have to try to figure out how we're going to recover or revive those are war-torn countries at the Bretton Woods Conference. And so the way we do this is by creating two different organizations that you guys may have heard of in the news, if you guys watch the news. The World Bank and the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund. So you have the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. You guys ever heard of these organizations before? Anyone at all? Does anyone know what they do? No? They're kind of important, but they don't really apply to us anymore. Here's what happened. The U.S. gave billions to both of these organizations. And these organizations gave all that money to war-torn and underdeveloped countries. So the World Bank and the IMF gave all that money to war-torn and underdeveloped countries. That's where all this money is coming from. The money's going to war-torn and underdeveloped countries. Countries like what? What countries might receive money from World Bank and the IMF? Countries where? Maybe Latin America, maybe Asia, Africa, parts of, I don't know, what other continents are there? Europe, they would receive some money as well. And the basic idea is that this would help them recover their economies. Now, if the money was coming from the U.S., and that money was helping their economies, would these countries be thankful to the United States for all the money that they were receiving? Like, wow, America's so great, giving us all this money, reviving our economy, and all America asks in return is that what kind of government do you set up? A democracy. Like, hey, you know what? We gave you all this money. Don't you want to be just like us so you can give money to your friends in the future? Well, we're just your friends, guys. We're here to help you out. And so the idea was that because this helped these developing and war-torn countries improve their economies, the idea was that they were going to create American-friendly countries. Wait, wouldn't you be friends with America if they gave you all this money? So it created, or pro-America countries. It created pro-American countries, and by reviving their economies as well, it helped to prevent the spread of communism. It would also help to prevent the spread of communism. So again, you have American-friendly or pro-U.S. countries or pro-American countries, and it's going to prevent the spread of communism. Because is the Soviet Union giving them money? No. We're giving them money. So you should be more like us. This is going to help us. Remember that third world? Is this going to help take some of them and put them in our camps? Yeah, we're going to be able to draft some of those people. We also create the United Nations. We talked about this briefly. But the United Nations was finally created at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference. And pretty much the United Nations creates an international government that has no power. It's pretty cool. An international government that has no real power. Because again, the United Nations, its military comes from the countries. So any country at any time can say, you know what, we're not going to give you troops anymore. And then it would have no power. But the United Nations becomes the international organization. You can learn more about them later. But just know United Nations. And so now that we have a structure for this new world, we have to answer the German question. What are we going to do about Germany? Well, we're going to do a few things with Germany. Number one, we're going to denazify Germany. Like we talked about before, we're going to denazify Germany. So you have Detoxification of Germany. And here's a picture you're seeing for the very first time. Denazification of Germany. So any Adolf Hitler streets will change to like Roosevelt Boulevards and all that fun stuff. We'll also have the Nuremberg Trials. What's a Nuremberg trial? What happened there? Who can tell me what happened during the Nuremberg Trials? Carissa? Yep. These are the Nazi war crimes trials. These are the Nazi war crimes trials. And so we kind of made sure this was a huge public event to kind of get people to feel like they got the revenge, they got their justice. So we had the Nazi war crime trials. But now that we've denazified, now that we've had the Nazi war crime trials, now it's time for Germany to move forward, to stop focusing on the past, because America has bigger problems to deal with now, like the Soviet Union in the East. So we now got to deal with occupied Germany. As you guys know, Germany was occupied by the four powers. The west of Germany was occupied by the British, the French, and the US. While East Germany was occupied by the Soviet Union, or the Russians. By the way, the same was true of the capital, Berlin. You see this white piece right here? That is Berlin. And the capital of Berlin was also divided by the British, the French, the Americans, and the Soviet Union. So West Berlin was controlled by the three powers, and East Berlin was controlled by the Soviet Union. Everyone clear on that so far? All right. So now we got to deal with the Germans. Now, are we going to let them unify or not? The Western powers, or the Americans and their allies, they wanted a strong, unified Germany. They wanted a strong, unified Germany. Why do they want the German government to become unified into one big, strong, powerful Germany again? Why do they want a strong Germany in the middle of Europe right there? Exactly. They want Germany to be able to withstand Russia. They want Germany to be able to stand against Russia. Because has Germany been able to do that in the past? Yeah, but now they'll be our friend when they're doing it. And so they want Germany to be able to stand against Russia, a very powerful Germany. Because is that going to help prevent the rest of Western Europe from collapsing? If Germany stands there strong and holds back that Iron Curtain, then we might have a chance against the Soviet Union. But if the Soviets take over all of Germany, is that going to be a problem for America? Because Germany is a very powerful country, and it has a lot of resources, so we want to hold them back. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, do they want a strong Germany? No, they want a weak. What's another word for not united? Divided, thank you. Last time I used ununified. We look like ununified. So they want a weak, divided Germany. They want a weak, divided Germany. Why don't they like strong Germany? Why don't the Soviets like a strong Germany? What has Germany done in the past? Declared war, invaded, taken over. They don't like that. So they want a weak Germany. For one reason, to prevent invasion of Russia again, which they've done twice. So they want a weak Germany to prevent invasion, but two, they want a weak Germany so they can what? So they can take it over. Now, the Western powers, America, France, Russia, America, France, the US, they really want a unified Germany. So they say, look, Soviet Union, you're either with us or against us. And somebody says, I'm not going to agree to this. So they say, fine. And so America, the British and the French, they decide to merge their regions and they create West Germany. So the Americans, French, and Germans, Americans, French, and British, they combine their zones and they create West Germany. The Soviets said, no way, I'm not going to merge with you. So instead, they create East Germany. So now you have two Germanys. I also want to point something out. The West Germans, they're a capitalist country with democracy. East Germans in communism with pretty much dictatorship. They're not going to openly say they're a dictatorship, but they're a dictatorship. And the capital of West Germany was Berlin. The capital of East Germany was Berlin. And interestingly enough, where is Berlin? Where is the capital of West Germany? In East Germany. And I'm going to go back to this real quick. Remember this little center right there? In the heart of that? That's Berlin. And Berlin was divided into 4 zones. And so when they created West Germany, the West Berliners also combined their zones, and that also became part of West Berlin. Rather West Germany, and this remained part of East Germany. And so what you have now is that in the Sea of Communism, you have this island of democracy of West Germany in the heart of East Germany. Does that make sense to everyone? So now you have that. And America is going to say, we're not going to abandon West Germany. We're not going to abandon West Berlin. That's going to be the capital, and we're going to make that the capital. So again, you had to drive into another country in order to get to your capital, is what happened. But they said, you know what? That's fine. If that's what it takes, we're not going to give up on West Berlin. Everyone clear on that so far? Because also, did the West Berliners want to fall to Soviet control? No way. So there's that going on. Moving on. We also reconstruct Japan. We'll go back to Germany in just a second. But we also have to reconstruct Japan because Japan was kind of crazy at the time. So we have the Japanese war crimes trials also. Where they're tried for war crimes. And then we promote democracy and a strong economy in Japan. After we tried them for war crimes, we're like, okay, you guys are sorry? Like, yeah, we're sorry. Okay, we're going to write your constitution. Now you guys are going to have democracy and a strong economy. Why do we want Japan to have a strong economy and democracy? Why do we want them to be strong? So they can also withstand communism. We want them to withstand communism. Good so far? Cool. So now we have allies in Germany. We have allies in Japan. And these we're going to use to, again, make sure that we prevent communism from spreading to these countries. Yeah. This middle picture? Cutting off the prisoner of war's head. These are the war crime trials that we're trying them for. So because the Japanese were really bad with their prisoners, they would kill them and torture them. This is part of the war crime trials that they're going to put them on trial for. Anyway. Now let's talk about a foreign policy that becomes the foundation of Truman's presidency. This is the policy of containment, and this is pretty much President Truman's foreign policy. The policy of containment. Basically, the policy of containment existed because there was a fear that Stalin was trying to spread communism. And was he trying to spread communism? Sure he was. And the more countries that Stalin spreads communism to, the fewer friends that America has. Does everyone kind of understand that? If you're a friend of Soviet Union, are you a friend of America? No. And so it's a race to get friends and allies. So again, the policy of containment is all about, again, preventing the spread of communism. Now, America, or rather the Soviets, feel like we have to spread communism because America is using all of its allies to kill the Russian bear. And in this case, here he is being a teddy bear. But the idea is we're under attack by America. It's America spreading its ideologies and trying to surround us and kill us. But America says, no, it's not. We're not trying to kill the Russian bear. The Russian bear is trying to kill us. It's the other way around. You know, it's the Russian bear, circling and developing its allies and trying to surround America. So in any case, they pretty much have the same philosophy, that our enemies are trying to circle the wagons and kill us. That's what's happening. In any case, here's what happens. George Kennan, who was the ambassador to the Soviet Union at the time, sends a letter to Truman. And the letter says that the Soviets are wanting to spread communism. So he says, we can't let that happen. So George Kennan sends a letter known as the Long Telegram or the X article, and the foundation of that letter is the Policy of Containment, where he urges Truman to adopt containment in order to prevent the spread of communism. So that's what the X article or Long Telegram said. It was designed to prevent the spread of communism. So here's George Kennan speaking about the alien he just found, hovering behind him. He also discovered aliens. Also, that's not true. So FDR reads the letter. He's like, oh, that's pretty good. Okay, let's do that. And so the policy of containment becomes the foundation of the Truman Doctrine. The policy of containment becomes the foundation of the Truman Doctrine. And if you have to know anything, folks, it's this quote down here. You should write that down. I'll read the entire quote, though. And it reads, at the present moment in world history, nearly every nation must choose between alternative ways of life. The choice is often not a free one. One way of life is based upon the will of the majority and is distinguished by free institutions, representative government, free elections, guarantees of individual liberty, freedom of speech and religion, and freedom from political oppression. Whose government is he describing? America's government. The second way of life is based upon the will of a minority, forcibly imposed upon the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, a controlled press and radio, fixed elections, and the suppression of personal freedom. What government is he talking about? The Soviet Union. It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. Saying that there are two ways of life, and one of them is trying to be forced upon you. It has to be our responsibility as a country to protect freedom, to prevent the spread of communism. And so the quote you guys should know is that bottom in bold there, that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation. What is subjugation? If you are subjugated, if you're being forced to do something, you're being subjugated by armed minorities, so the few crazy people with weapons that want to be communists, or by outside pressures. Who are they talking about? Soviet Union. And so he wants to prevent the spread of communism. So the way he's going to do it, folks, through the Truman Doctrine, is he's going to provide $400 million in military aid to Greece and Turkey. So he will provide money to other countries, but the two you guys need to be most familiar with is Greece and Turkey, who are both being currently attacked by communists in both countries, either by armed minorities within the country or by the Soviet Union from outside. And they're going to give them $400 million in military aid. Is this money supposed to revive their economy? No. This money is going to be in the form of what? Guns, tanks, planes, bombs. We're going to help them fight in order to prevent the spread of communism. Does that make sense to everyone? The goal is to contain. And again, I want to make the policy of containment very clear. Assume that this jar represents the Soviet Union, and it's filled full of communism. If I turn this over, what's going to happen to communism? It's going to start spilling and spreading out. So we're going to go ahead and contain it. And we're going to turn it over, and we're going to prevent it from spreading. What didn't we do? We didn't get rid of communism. I want to make that clear. Containment is not about eliminating communism. It's at minimum, or at the most, trying to prevent it from spreading. We don't know if we can eliminate it yet, but the best that we can do at least is to what? Prevent it from spreading. Does that make sense? So this is not a policy of eliminating communism at the heart. It's about preventing it from spreading. It can stay where it is right now, but can it get any bigger? No, and that's the whole point of containment. We'll have other policies about getting rid of communism under other presidents. But again, this is us helping the Greeks fight the Russian bear who's taken over, Athens and the Parthenon. And here's us giving weapons to Turkey. And we're giving them, subs and boats and planes and tanks and soldiers. I mean, we're trying to help them fight against Russian pressure. Does that make sense to everyone? It's military aid, giving them soldiers and guns and tanks to fight the Russians. And so here we are putting a cork in Stalin's pipe as he tries to take over the rest of the world. So put a cork in it. That's what we did. And here we are again. Money is patrolling the Mediterranean, preventing the Russians from taking over the rest of the world. Again, the US dollar is patrolling the area. Another way to then make sure that communism does not spread is through the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan was designed to help the European economy recover from chaos. It was supposed to help the European economy recover from chaos, if you want to be dramatic. And the idea was, in this cartoon, we, the American taxpayer, are going to teach Europe how to do what? We're going to teach them how to ride a bike. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to help them right now with these training wheels, these self-supports on the bottom. But eventually, we're going to take those training wheels off, and what should they be able to do on their own? Ride the bike themselves, maintain their economy on their own. You guys get the analogy? Well, we're going to help you ride this bike first. But the goal is eventually we should be able to take off those training wheels, and you guys should be able to ride this bike on your own. That Marshall Plan is supposed to help them out. The reason why this was so critical is, what was the condition of Europe after World War II? Was it in good condition or bad condition? Bad condition. People were poor. People lost their jobs. People were unemployed. People had no homes. And were people angry? Were people sad about all of this? Sure. And in that time when people are depressed and angry, is that a really good opportunity for communism to come in and maybe ask them, hey, you're upset. Capitalism doesn't seem to be working, does it? Maybe you might want to consider communism. I mean, is that a good time to get people to kind of maybe switch sides? Sure. So they say we have to prevent that. We have to make sure that these people are happy. And so George Marshall, Secretary of State, diverts $12.5 billion to the European economy. We're going to divert $12.5 billion to the European economy. Because, folks, what happened the last time the European economy fell into chaos? Who came to power when the European economy collapsed? Hitler. So we're afraid that something similar might happen. So we want to make these people happy, because do happy people have revolutions? No, they don't. Happy people don't have revolutions, guys. That's something to keep in mind. And so $12.5 billion to recover the European economy. That's a lot of money. And unlike the Dawes Plan, we'll make sure this one just doesn't fail. Remember the Dawes Plan? It was working for a while, and then we stopped paying it. We're going to make sure this one doesn't happen to that. By recovering the U.S. economy, folks, again, what are we trying to, by recovering the European economy, what are we trying to do? Yeah, we're trying to prevent the spread of communism through economic aid. That's the point. By all of these countries getting money from the Marshall Plan, will communism spread to these countries? No, because they'll be happy. And again, happy people don't have revolutions. Here's the Marshall Plan, recovering the European economy. And Stalin's like, oh, I can do that too. And so here's me getting my people to work the soil. And he says, oh, this is much better because there's no mechanical problems. See, this won't break down. If it breaks down, let's get another human. And that's the basic idea. And so the goal was, again, to recover the European economy. Here's Stalin trying to block the European recovery. By the way, this is goaltending because the ball is already dropping, in case you guys are curious. So that should count regardless. Without the Marshall Plan, your bread would be bare and so would your children. So it's pretty good. Western Europe is afraid and they're waiting for the Marshall Plan to be passed. And if they delay any longer, the Russian bear is going to destroy, Western Europe. Step on it, Doc. Communism is on its way in chaos. We got to go ahead and fix Western Europe quickly. The Germans really like the Marshall Plan. So there they are, happy about it. And so did America pretty much carry Europe on its shoulders? The world on its shoulders to prevent it from falling into chaos? Yeah, because if it falls into chaos, they're going to sink to the bottom to communism. And here are two really cool cartoons of the Marshall Plan. I think these are awesome. Just very colorful. But again, you see this and you're like, wow. Look at this. Whatever the weather, we must move together. You're like, why wouldn't you want to be part of that? They're just so poetic, America. Whereas Stalin's like, you join Russia, and we promise not to kill you every day. I don't like that so much. Now, Russia would not allow the Eastern Bloc to accept American money. So Russia developed the Molotov Plan, and this was an answer to the Marshall Plan. The Molotov Plan was the Russian answer to the Molotov Plan. Yeah, the Marshall Plan. What? The Molotov Plan was a Russian response to the Marshall Plan. I see what happened. The Molotov Plan was a Russian response to the Marshall Plan. Did I say it right that time? Okay. So, the idea was that the Eastern Bloc could not take money from America. They were supposed to take money from who? The Soviets. Now, to be fair, though, the Molotov Plan was not intended to, it was supposed to help their economies, but they didn't, because do we want the Eastern Bloc to be strong? No, they want them to be controlled by the Soviets. So they're like, don't take American money. Take Soviet money. We'll improve your economy fast. They didn't. But the idea was, you can't take their money, you take our money. So that happened. We also created the Organization of American States. Here's another organization created, or the Organización de los Estados Americanos. For you Spanish speakers, Organización de los Estados Americanos. Pretty much, this was created to prevent the spread of communism in Latin America. Did we succeed? No. Cuba became communist, as did Venezuela. But we tried. Prevent the spread of communism in Latin America. The Organización de los Estados Americanos.
Where did it fail?
Cuba and Venezuela. We'll talk about them later. And so now that we have all this world policy stuff, we gotta refigure, rearm, reorganize the U.S. government. And so we pass the National Security Act of 1947. So again, this is us reorganizing and rearming. And so we passed the National Security Act of 1947. And what the National Security Act of 1947 does is it creates these three organizations and agencies. The first is the Department of Defense, or the DoD. This replaces what previous Stop sneezing. This replaces what previous department? Previous slide said U.S. government reorganization and rearmament. U.S. government organization and rearmament. So the National Security Act creates the DoD, the Department of Defense, which replaces what previous department? Department of what? War. We don't have a Department of War anymore. We don't wage wars. We defend America. So we changed the term. We're no longer a Department of War, we're a Department of Defense. And we decide to base them at the Pentagon. You guys know the Pentagon in Washington, right? It's shaped like that. No, that's a quadrilateral, guys. Pentagon has 5 sides. But more like that. We also create the National Security Agency, or the NSA. The NSA's job, again, if this is defense, the NSA's job is to deal with threats to the U.S., potential threats. And the CIA's job, their purpose is to do what? Information gathering. Their job is information gathering. So again, you have DoD, who's defense, national security, which is threats, CIA, which is intelligence or information gathering. So DoD, NSA, CIA. Good? Defense, threats, information gathering. Now, one of the recommendations they released then is a recommendation called NSC 68. NSC 68 was a recommendation released by the National Security Council. And the recommendation was that we need to increase military spending by 4-fold. They said they want to increase military spending by 4 times because we're not spending enough. If we want to fight this Cold War and prevent the spread of communism, they said we had to increase military spending 4 times. Or quadruple military spending. In case you're curious what our military spending looks like today, it looks like that. That's us. We spend more on our military than the 15 other countries behind us combined. Because we spend a lot of money on our military. Other things that we do. We create the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty. These organizations, also you have Radio Free Asia, but just know these two. These are designed to promote democracy and capitalism in places that we can't go. Like across what? Yes. But across what? Yes, across the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe. The goal is to spread democracy and capitalism across the Iron Curtain. Because we can't send them pamphlets or textbooks or information about democracy via paper form. We can't even send our people. But the Soviets can't stop radio waves, and so it's supposed to promote democracy and capitalism across the Iron Curtain. Cool? Awesome. So last thing we're going to talk about today, the Berlin Airlift, which is pretty awesome. Money. Found money. It's exciting. When you find money in your pockets. The Berlin Airlift, July 24, 1948 to May 12th, 1949. Let me explain what happened here in the Berlin Airlift. Now you guys might be somewhat familiar. Here's what happens. First off, the Berlin Blockade. Germany, or rather, the Soviet Union, decides to blockade West Berlin. Okay, so here's what happens in the Berlin Blockade. The Soviets decide to blockade West Berlin. And why are they able to do that? Where is West Berlin? in the heart of East Germany. So pretty much West Berlin is surrounded by communism already, right? And so they decide to blockade it. And they blockade it for two reasons. Number one, they blockade it in response to the unification of West Germany, or to the creation of West Germany. So they blockade Berlin in response to the unification of West Germany, or the creation of West Germany. They're like, what? You merged even though we said not to? Fine, we're going to take away West Berlin from you. The second reason why they do it, East Germans were going to West Berlin to escape to West Germany. So East Germans were like sneaking into West Berlin, getting on planes and flying to West Germany, where life was significantly better than East Germany. Does that make sense? And you can easily go from West Germany to West Berlin and back and forth because they're part of the same country, right? So they figured so long as we can get into West Berlin, we can get to West Germany, which is much easier than sneaking into West Germany from East Germany because of the border. And so this is what they tried to do. And so the Soviets said, no more, this is making us look terrible. So they shut down all the roads. They blocked all the roads. And they shut off all electricity. They shut off all roads and shut off all electricity. Pretty much now you have an island of West Berlin in the heart of, the East German Communist Empire. The Soviet hope was that by holding these 2 million people pretty much hostage, what would the Americans do? They were hoping that, hey, look, either you give up on these people or they're going to starve or whatever. And so the hope was that America would what? Give up. They would give up West Berlin and unify all of Germany together. But the Americans said, no, we are not going to do that. We will not allow this to happen. We will not abandon West Berlin. So the Americans said, fine. If we can't go by road, we will find a way to break that Berlin blockade. And if we can't go by road, we'll go by air. And so they flew birds across with this like coal in their feet. It was the stupidest plan ever. No, what they did is the Berlin Airlift. And the Berlin Airlift is where the US, British, and French flew all the supplies needed to West Berlin. They flew all the supplies to West Berlin. Pretty much they organized a massive airlift of all the supplies. The US, British, and France organized a massive airlift to supply West Berlin. Because just because they were cut off said, no, we still have your back, West Berlin. We will not abandon you. So they begin a massive airlift of goods. They deliver things like milk, which is now a weapon of democracy. And here is America flying and risking their lives and airdropping milk to the people. Here they are filling their planes with milk, and then they would drop this off into West Berlin. And here's how this would work, guys. This is probably one of the most impressive things that happens in history. The planes got so good, they were like right behind each other, that a plane would fly from Germany, which is about 15 minutes to West Germany, that's just 15 minutes away, into West Berlin, land on the tarmac, slow down its engines but not shut them off, open the back door, push out the cargo, close the door, and before they hit the end, rev up their engines and take off. They would never stop, and they would push the cargo out. And as they did that, another plane would land right behind them. And it would push their cargo out, take off, and as they went, another plane would land behind them. They got so good at it that at its peak, they were able to land a plane every 30 seconds to unload cargo. Drop, take off, land, drop, take off. And this is how close many of them were from time to time. I mean, just in order, landing, unloading, taking off, landing, unloading, taking off. And they were just going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for almost a full year, dropping off all the supplies necessary. Because again, did the West Berliners have anything? If the Americans didn't deliver these goods, would they have anything left? No, because they were blockaded completely. And again, here are the West Berliners excited that the Americans are arriving. Here again, the West Berliners excited about the Americans flying over. Here are kids excited about what they have to offer. Here's an American dropping chocolates out the window with mini parachutes to land for the kids. And so the basic idea is this is what America is offering. And how does this make America look? America looks like the good guy. This is a huge media victory for America. Huge media victory. We gained so much goodwill from this because look what America's willing to do for the Berliners. They're willing to risk their lives. They're providing them by the air for almost a year. And what is Russia doing? Russia's trying to make them starve to death? Well, this media victory makes America look like a good guy. This media victory gives America so much goodwill from the rest of the world. And what does Russia look like? A bad guy, a D-bag, a horrible person. You're just starving those people? Is that what you're doing, Russia? Is that what you do? Well, folks, again, if you want to look at the exact numbers, they flew at most 500 feet apart from each other. The bigger planes flew about 15 minutes apart because they were so far away. But some of them flew 3 minutes away from each other, and there was only 5,000 feet, so they would fly, land, take off, refuel, fly, land, take off, refuel. From airport to airport, just shuttling back and forth over and over and over again. And guys, remember, you're landing what? Every minute, at most, about every minute a plane is landing. On average, about a minute, there's another plane landing in Berlin. That's a really short amount of time. You guys have been at the airport before. How long does it take for an airplane to take off? Like an hour? A minute, a plane is landing. And so, after almost a full year, the blockade ends and the airlift wins. Which also means if the blockade ends, who loses? Soviets. And who wins? The US. So the blockade ended and the airlift won. That meant the US lost, or US won, and the Soviets lost. Here's the stats. Over 2 million tons of supplies were flown. 660,000 tons of coal were flown in that time. 277,000 flights is a more accurate number. 277,000 flights is a much more accurate number. 277,000 flights. 5,000 tons a day. 1,700 flights a day. Guys, we did the math. It's about a flight per minute. A flight per minute is how many flights they're making per minute. Can you imagine just all day, just one flight per minute, landing? 120 planes would have landed by the time this class is over. 120! Crazy. Lasts from June 1940 to 1949. And after 277,000 flights, the impressive part, though while a little bit sad, is that 41 Americans, 31 British, and 6 Germans were killed. That's pretty good, though, considering you're flying 1,700 times per day. And so, yes, some planes did crash, and it was through mechanical failure, not because the pilots were bad at it. But again, a few people lost their lives, and again, does that make America seem more like a hero? Because we were willing to risk our lives, and some people gave their lives so the Berliners wouldn't have to lose theirs. That's impressive, and this is a victory for America. Good? Cool. So, folks, remember, again, I'll see you guys on Friday to continue Truman, but you have Unit 9 due on Monday. That's going to be the essay, or the DBQ, and the multiple choice. So don't forget to do those. Have a wonderful day, guys. I'll see you guys on Friday. See you later.